Thank you for joining us on another edition of PSL Living. I'm Christina Siuperger, the Communications Director, and today I'm very excited to say we have Russ Blackburn, our City Manager, joining us, and we're going to be talking about an extremely exciting subject, even though some people might not think it's exciting. It is. It is about the city's budget. Welcome, Mr. Blackburn. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Christina. I'm glad to be here.
Well, the budget, a lot of people think about it. It's numbers. Nobody wants to really evaluate it or talk about the detail of it, but it is the single most important document that a city can have. Can you tell us a little bit about why a city has a budget to begin with?
Well, let's take a step back even further. The City Council adopts a strategic plan. And from a big picture, that's what the council wants to be known for, what they think are the major issues that the citizens are expecting from the term of this council. And so to implement that plan, each year we adopt an annual budget. And so this year's budget, has been crafted around expected revenues, the strategic initiatives that the council has identified, and how we can best achieve those objectives that support those strategic initiatives and goals. And so the budget is the one document that really summarizes the main work effort of the city staff anticipated during the next year.
So that's very exciting to know, also because as the strategic plan evolves and it's developed and council adds to it or adds new initiatives, the budget is then tailored around that. And so every year the city does have to develop a budget. So let's talk a little bit about what the big picture for the budget is for this year.
Well, this year the City Council met in February and gave me some broad direction as to what they would like to see achieved through the budget. And certainly, as the city manager, it's my responsibility to look at each department, see what the needs are, to continue to provide a very high level of customer service and to be responsive to our community. The council identified three major objectives. One is we wanted to continue with our high level of service. Second, they wanted to reduce our millage, if possible, and they wanted to reduce our total debt. The council has been focusing on each of those three objectives since I got here last year, and I suspect that those will continue to be objectives that we have as a city for a number of years.
I know that there's a lot of talk about a big focus being on the general fund and the reduction in that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the city's total budget is about $509 million. So it sounds like a big number, and it is. But you have to remember that we're a provider of water and sewer services. So as our bills come in, that is a large portion of the budget. We also have our building department that's an enterprise or a separate business unit. So when you subtract out those large chunks of our budget, the portion of the budget that really impacts most of our city departments and most of the citizens is called the general fund. So the general fund is the fund that includes our property tax payments. It includes certain revenues if we pay smaller fees, transfers from the state or other grants. And so that general fund is a fund that provides monies for the police department, the planning department, for a big portion of the public works department, those departments and functions that don't have their own revenue source, and which is a lot of the services that we value the most as a local government and as our citizens value, because we want to be safe, but it's hard to charge a fee. When you're called for the police department, often if you're the crook, you're not going to pay the fee.
Sure.
So we pay those expenditures and pay for those services out of the general fund. So this year's general fund is around $110 million. It's actually a reduction of about $3.5 million from last year. So that reduction occurred because one of the actions the council took this spring was to use some of our undesignated reserve and to actually reduce one of our bond issues, the total indebtedness on that bond issue, which then helped us to reduce our debt service for the year, and that brought our budget down.
So it created savings in return. So what else is a positive message from the budget? I know that we had our assessed values at 10.25%.
You're right.
And I know it's actually higher. It's coming a little bit higher.
So as a city, we should all be proud, excited, looking forward to the future. One of the indicators of how well we're doing as a city is the fact that our assessed base, the total value of the city that is taxed, is growing. And it is grew based on the preliminary values that we received on June 1st by 10.25 mils. The final assessed value, which we received from the property appraiser, grew by 11.1% in the millage. And so that's a very positive indicator that the city has a lot of economic growth. There are things happening. There's new construction. There's values are increasing for our property owners. And it also has an impact, particularly for the new growth, of helping us to provide additional services or better service.
Sure. And in the budget, there's recommendations on what to do with the revenue that the city receives. But in reference to this additional revenue, are you making any recommendations as to what council should be doing with this additional fund?
So thank you. So for the 10.25%, which my recommended budget is crafted around that total number. I had made some assumptions that we would have a growth rate of around 7% in our assessed base. And so we had some additional revenue early on. And now that we have a total of 11.1% increase in the assessed base, those funds have not been allocated. So the council will have the choice of reducing the tax rate, reducing some of our debt, putting aside some of the money to reduce future debt, or some allocation of funds for future services. So those funds really give the council a little bit more flexibility in pursuing their goals and objectives.
But ultimately, the decision comes from a council. They make the decision as to what gets done with that amount of money, like with everything else that's in the budget. It is a proposed budget that they do have to adopt and approve or make suggestions or change or ask to have something else included.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The budget that I provide to council is technically called the city manager's recommended budget. So once it passes from me to the council and they have their workshops and set a tentative millage, now it's council's budget. But at this point, it's my recommended budget, which they can change.
So in this, you're setting aside, I believe it's $1.65 million for debt reduction.
That's correct.
And why is that important?
So the council is aware and has focused for the last 2 or 3 years that our debt has historically been a little bit higher than comparable cities and counties. So at one point in 2010, the total debt for the city was around $1 billion. And
that's a big number.
It's a big number. It's actually $1.1 billion. And so that would be, if you look at that compared to other cities, that's higher than most cities would have. Now, there were some reasons why our total debt was that high, and some of those are still valid. But overall, our debt was higher, and the council voted and asked me in pursuing one of their objectives, goal is to reduce the city's total indebtedness. So I've pursued that. The previous council, this council has been very aggressive in reducing that debt. I'm pleased to say that for the FY18 budget, our total debt is now $793 million. So that's about a 25% reduction in total debt since that high water mark in 2010.
Yeah, that's significant as well too. So that's
It's very
definitely a very
significant.
positive trend.
Yeah.
And can you explain a little bit for our viewers what good debt is? Because, no debt is good debt, but there is some debt that you would want to have in a city.
So that's a great question because, we would tend to think, well, who wants to be in debt? Well, the reality is that one of the things that cities do that we may not do at our own homes is we build for 30 and 50-year timelines and even longer. And so our water and sewer system, our roads are all built with a 50-year timeline. So they'll be used, the water and sewer system, the road system, some of our other infrastructure will be used by future generations. So one of the big questions is how to best fund a service that will be used by somebody 25 years from now or even 30 years from now. So the way you do that to make sure there is intergenerational equity, that we today are not paying for services for people 25 years from now, is that you do borrow. And borrowing for some infrastructure equalizes those payments out for the folks who will use the service today and the folks who will be using it 30 years from now. So when we talk about good debt, debt that assures that the person in the future will help to pay for it, just like the person today, is a reasonable way to finance local government services.
Great. And I think this year too, something that's different is that we've allocated, I believe, about $2 million for repair and addressing deferred maintenance issues.
We have. The recession was difficult on the city of Port St. Lucie. We had, in some cases, roofs that were not repaired or replaced in a timely manner, buildings that needed to be repaired, that the funds were just not available. So this year's a catch-up year. We're allocating approximately $2 million for a number of different repairs and maintenance to our buildings that really have to be done. We're very fortunate that we're in a position this year to address some of those deferred maintenance issues.
CIP projects, that's another important part of the budget, which definitely benefits the community. So can you talk a little bit about some of the CIP projects that are in the budget this year?
Sure. Well, one of the things that we leave behind as a city will be our projects, our capital projects, our improvements to our drainage system, our water quality system, our park system. So this year, we are able to address several major needs in the community. One is in the Torino area, that's the northwest part of the city. There are very few park facilities up in that area. And so we're able to fund both the design and the construction of the Winter Lakes Park. This will be providing additional park services, fields, parking, other amenities for that area of the city. It's just a start, but it will be a very good park system in the northern part of the city. Ultimately, we're also looking at the Torino area for another park. But the Winter Lakes will both design and fund this year. So another one of our major responsibilities as a city is water quality. We remember last year you had the algae blooms in the Indian River Lagoon.
We'd like to forget it, but no, I don't think anyone can.
And the North Fork of the St. Lucie. So there are not many things the city can do to address those issues that really have a substantive impact. But one of the things we've identified is a project called the McCarty Ranch Water Farming Project. And so it's kind of an interesting concept. We're going to take water out of the C-23 canal. That's fairly dirty water.
Sure.
We're going to pump it into a series of holding cells or lakes, cleanse the water, and then put it back into the C-23. So this is at this point designed for 7 cells. We have funding for one of the cells, the design and the construction of a cell. Previously, we received funding for another cell design and construction from the South Florida Water Management District. Well, this cell was funded by legislative funding that was received from our legislature for this year. So this will be 2 of the 7 cells will now be completed by the end of the fiscal year 18, and it'll help to clean the water coming out of the C23. So when all 7 cells are complete, we'll actually be cleansing 21% of the water going through the C23.
Wow, so it has the potential to clean over 20%.
Very significant.
That is very significant, and it's also on city property out at McCarty Ranch right now, which is just land out there, and this is a perfect purpose for that. And so we're going to continually go after funding and hoping that we can get the rest of those cells funded so we can get the whole project built out.
That is our goal, and we think it's an exciting project. It's unique, and it shows what a city can do on its own without having federal approval, without having years and years of study. It's a quick get it done, get something going.
Sure, and it benefits not just the city, but the county and everybody else, that is touched by the river.
It really has a regional impact.
Yes, it does. We talked about, McCarty Ranch water farming. I know 2 other things that are very exciting that are coming down the pike is the Sidewalk 10-year master plan and the resurfacing master plan that's coming along as well, too.
So the city council will approve on July the 19th a 10-year sidewalk plan and a 10-year resurfacing plan. So those plans are included in the capital element of our budget, and they really lay out an aggressive plan for improving sidewalks, for resurfacing streets. So we have about $2 million available this year for resurfacing, about the same amount available for sidewalks. Mm-hmm. So the council has set a goal that they really would like to have sidewalks on one side of all arterials. As we know, our city was not designed that way, unfortunately, but it's important as we, as a community and as a city, start wanting to have more choices. You don't always have to drive in your car. You can ride your bike. You can walk. You can ride safely on your bike, and you can walk safely on a sidewalk. But we also have a lot of streets as a city, and many of those are local neighborhood streets, but they need to be resurfaced periodically. And so this really starts us down a road of having funds available to resurface our streets in a timely manner and to add sidewalks.
Both are very important to the community because it's been a goal of council for a long time, and I'm happy to see that there's actually forward movement on that, and a plan that our residents can then follow, and they can know which portion is being done this year, which portion is going to be done, next year, all within a 10-year plan of what's going to be happening in the city.
And I appreciate you mentioning that, because once the plan is approved, this budget year has been adopted by the council. We will have both of those plans up on our city's internet site, so you can go on. We plan to have an interactive map, so there'll be an icon of some kind on a map that you can click on if it's in your neighborhood, and it'll tell you what will be the metes and bounds of that project and when it will occur.
Sure, and that's very informative because a lot of times that's where residents want to know. They'll patiently wait, but they just want to know when is it going to be their turn or what part of the city is being worked on. And so this interactive map will show that to them, and the 10-year plan will be laid out for them to follow, and look on our website for that. So we also talked about other things that are changing in the budget, and one of them is that we're adding new positions this year. I believe there's 24.75, about 24 head counts that are being added into the budget. Can you talk to us a little bit about what departments are getting staff?
So as I mentioned early on, we have these 3 major objectives: providing excellent services, reducing our debt, and reducing our millage where possible. And so to keep our services at a high level, we've been evaluating where are we straining as we have growth, where are we not meeting expectations, and what positions do we need, recognizing we need to be very judicious. And so we've looked at the areas. We're adding 4.5 positions in the police department. Our department that had the largest number of reductions during the recession was our Parks and Recreation department. We're fortunately able to add 5 full-time positions back into the department. That will help them to keep a high level of service. 2 initiatives that the council passed an ordinance on during the last year or two that we really have had the manpower to implement as well as we should have. One of them was a vacant lot clearing program where citizens could make the city aware if there were lots that were overgrown to the point that they were impacting the quality of life for the next door neighbors. And so we're adding a code enforcement officer to help with enforcement and research on that program. And then the others, sober homes. We've seen a number of different sober homes begin to operate in the city. Some of those sober homes, because of the number of occupants, they have negative impacts on the surrounding neighbors, whether it's over parking in the front yard, it's noise issues. And so we're dedicating a code enforcement officer just to help enforce the existing code and ensure that those sober homes are good neighbors with the rest of the community.
So it's very focused, and it's again to
Yes.
address, council's direction on that.
Correct.
So that makes a lot of sense. I realize that this year there is actually a 27 million increase in the budget. Why?
So we talked early on, the total budget's around $510 million. So recognizing that a big portion of that budget is our utilities, fees, and revenues that come in. So as the number of new people in the community increases, they're using water and sewer services. So we're seeing our total revenues go up. Also, as we have an economy that's functioning at closer to 100% capacity, people are using more services. So just our enterprise funds, the revenue they're generating is going up. Also, the building department has seen at least a 30% increase year to year in the volume of activity. And so those things increase the total budget. They may not impact the general fund, which we've spent a lot of time talking about, but they do impact the total budget.
Understand. So stormwater fees are also increasing. Can you explain to us why that's happening?
So stormwater fees are increasing about 1.5%, so less than the inflation rate. But we do have to keep up with the water quality projects, with equipment replacement and the manpower to ensure that we comply with the federal and the state standards for water quality, but also make sure that for our own quality of life that we address stormwater with volume and water quality. And so those fees are going up a small amount. It's less than the inflation rate, but it is a area of our local government where we get a big bang for our dollar, because we're also able to leverage additional stormwater funds and get grants and other funding from both the state and the federal government to really multiply our local dollars.
Great. So what's the next step with the budget process?
So
You've delivered it June 30th, right?
That's
that was
right.
the
I've
magic
done my
date.
part.
And I have to say in advance that was actually ahead of schedule, because I believe in past years they've delivered it closer to the actual retreat date. So I know that we delivered the budget ahead of time, allowing council more time to review it. So I think that was a great thing. And that happened on June 30th. So now what happens next?
So the next step is the city council has scheduled a retreat or workshop on July the 19th, 20th, and 21st. So on the 19th, they'll be talking about a broad range of subjects, but 3 of the more important subjects are: how will we spend our community development block grant funds, which is proposed that we use a majority of those funds for sidewalk installation, this 10-year sidewalk master plan, and the 10-year resurfacing plan. So that will occur on the 19th. Then we'll get into the meat of the budget on the 20th, and with the adoption of a tentative millage on the 21st of July. So we had 3 days of very intense work on the FY18 budget. So we would expect on the 21st, sometime during that afternoon, the council will have answered most of its questions and will set a tentative tax rate. So that information is then provided and sent out through the trim notice, the truth and millage notice. Every taxpayer will get that notice as to what is proposed. Again, we're proposing a decrease in our millage. So taxpayers will have that information. Then in September, I believe it's the 11th and the 25th, we have our formal budget hearings. So the first one is the 11th, and then on the 25th, we actually set the final millage rate for our FY18 budget. And then celebration.
Because the budget is
October
adopted,
1,
right?
October 1, we start a new fiscal year.
So those are key important dates for the public to remember. Everyone is invited to the retreat in July. Should they want to come, they can also watch it on TV 20. It's
Yes.
important if you have an interest in the budget. You know, that's a great time to tune in because you can see the discussion that council has. You can see issues or concerns that are raised, and there's valuable discussion there so that anyone who wants to better understand how this process works, that's something that's good for them
Yes.
to do during the July retreat. And then, of course, the public is invited to the 2 hearings that we have in September, and most importantly, the 25th, because that's the day that we adopt the budget.
That's the final budget.
The millage rate is set. So when the tentative millage rate is set, that means that we can't go above it. Is that correct? Can you
That's
explain
correct.
that for our
So,
viewers?
So under state statute, you have to, you set that tentative millage rate, and we'll do that on the 21st of July. The money, the identified millage rate is then communicated to the property owners through the trim notice in August. We can go down on our millage rate at that point, but we cannot go higher without sending a new trim notice out, which is very expensive and time consuming. So I've never been part of a budget where the trim notice was actually sent out again due to an increase in the tax rate. So it will, hopefully we've hit the right mark. You know, we've lowered the millage some, we've reduced our debt and are setting aside funds to continue to reduce our total debt, and we've funded a very high level and good quality service. So we would hope that and expect the council to, in setting that tentative millage rate, to be comfortable at that point, and we hope that our citizens will continue to receive an outstanding service at a reasonable and fair rate.
Great. So we are giving the public plenty of opportunity to join us in the budget process, to learn as much as they would like to. And of course, if anyone ever has questions, they're welcome to call our offices and we'll point them in the right direction to get their questions answered. Because again, it's a very important thing for us to be able to get the budget done every single year. I know an enormous amount of work goes into it. Staff works on it diligently throughout the year because the minute we get the budget approved, the process starts all over again for us, and then we come back full circle again to where we are today. But there's lots of valuable information out there on our website as well too. We actually created this fabulous little budget in brief, but it is available on the city's website, and it gives you sort of a little cheat sheet as to what the budget is all about. So it gives you the big picture on there, the things that are happening in the city, talks about the capital improvement plan, the number of FTEs that we're adding, talks about the debt reduction. Really cool tool to look at because it sort of sums it up for you. But also, in addition, we have the comprehensive proposed budget that the city manager has provided to council, available on our website. And I think it's like 500 and some odd pages this year.
No, it's only
more?
450.
Oh, sorry, 450. Still pretty thick volume, but for anyone who's interested, of course, it's up on our website. They're welcome to look at it, go through it if they have questions or they would like to learn more about something. We're very open to talking about it. They can also learn again on July 19th, 20th, and the 21st when we will be at our retreat. That's a good time to come in and watch council go through the process with everything. And then we have 2 budget hearings scheduled September 11th and September 25th.
Correct.
And then the budget gets approved and finalized and set September 25th. That's the magic date.
That's right.
So I think that sort of covers everything that we wanted to talk about the budget, unless there's something else that you can think of that we didn't talk about.
This is our plan, really, of what we're going to do, both at a policy level, and then this is the plan that your staff for the city of Port St. Lucie will implement during the coming year. So if there's something missing, you need to let us know, and if we've gotten it right, we always appreciate that input as well.
Sure, and we welcome that engagement from the public all the time, because this is all for them, actually. It's
Right.
the roadmap and how we're going to finance it.
Yeah.
So I thank everybody for joining us and listening to us. I hope you tune in again next week, and I'd really like to thank Mr. Blackburn for joining us today, our city manager, and explaining our budget. I hope it gives everyone a better understanding, and like I said, if you would like to learn more, please visit our website, www.cityofpsl.com, and you can click on the budget tabs and you can find all of this information there. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look to see you next time on PSL Living.